Welcome to Stockton 360 on KXVS, the voice of Stockton. That's right. Broadcasting at thevoiceofstockton.org, soon to be on 92.1 FM in the lovely city of Stockton. Broadcasting from Stone Soup Studios on the lovely Miracle Mile. This is Governor Don.
Professor Jimenez.
And we're here with our special guest of the day, Professor Stephen Choi. Very, very smart guy in justice and the administration of justice, of course. And we're going to be talking to him about use of force. It's a hot topic it's going on all across the country. We saw even at the Republican National Convention yesterday, the theme was Make America Safe Again. And this is, it's just a big deal to everyone. Welcome, Professor Choi. How are you?
Thank you very much.
All right. It's been a while since we've got to speak on the air. How have you been?
Been doing good. It's a great summer. I've actually been working a lot more in the law enforcement side because it's my summer break from teaching, and it's pretty busy out there.
It's hot.
It's hot, and with the bulletproof vest, it's even hotter. That thing does not sweat. It feels like a girdle.
That's what breathe,
it does. No, it does not.
You need to have that wicking bulletproof vest. Now, and when it gets hot, I mean, people kind of get a little crazy too, right? It gets a little tougher out there when the temperature's up.
Yeah, there's a correlation. When the temperature goes up, there's more violent crime.
Right.
More people are outside. When it's cold, it's 20 degrees, wind's blowing, it feels like 0 degrees.
Yeah.
People want to stay inside, and there seems to be a lot less violent calls.
Yeah. But when it gets hot, oh man, people just go wild.
People start drinking earlier. People are a little bit more aggravated, a little bit more moody, maybe a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
4th of July, I was working graveyard, and I got off right at 6 a.m., 6.5 hours later. We had a Norteño, Sereno rolling gun battle right outside of our city. A Norteño and Sereno in separate cars started shooting at each other, and the girlfriend of the Norteño was shot and killed.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm speechless to that.
That is crazy.
Wow.
That's crazy. But unfortunately, not so rare. It's I mean, when you shared with your law enforcement buddies that it happened, I'm sure nobody was surprised. It's like, oh.
No, what was, because I'm still teaching during the summer, I got an email from my chief, and it said, all sworn personnel on this date, we are canceling leave, we're canceling vacations, everybody will report to duty, and if you have an exception, you need to notify me now.
Wow.
But yeah, it was crazy.
Man. Well,
glad that you're safe.
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah. That is something we're glad for every day. And of course, I mean, we all take risks when we leave the house, and we take risks when we wake up. But not the kind of risks that you take, especially when you're out there in your duties as a sworn officer. And we thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Now, there's been so much conversation going on, so much, not enough conversation, I think. So much outlashing, vitriolic speech, finger pointing, a lot of that. I think less conversation than is necessary, but we have had some good conversations. We even got to see him play it out in front of the news media coming from the Dallas situation. The chief there seemed to have a very level head about the whole situation. That, unfortunately, is kind of uncommon sometimes, or at least perceived to be. But how important do you think that is in the resolution of situations like this, for the top law enforcement officer to have that kind of metered approach?
It's difficult. I can only imagine when you lose 5 officers like they did in Dallas, when you lose 3 officers in Baton Rouge, and you have the families that are in mourning, you have crises, you have people that are outside your community, because not one of those shooters was from that city.
Right.
They both came from miles away to bring their violence and their hatred to that city. But you also have to understand that in law enforcement, we do a lot of things right, but when we do them wrong, they get magnified immensely.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to say to you that 100% of officers are good. We have some bad apples.
Right.
And we try to root them out. But in the meantime, when somebody makes a mistake, and unfortunately in these two incidents in the Black Lives Matter movement, they were black males, and they were killed by white police officers. And when you just look at plain statistics of black males being stopped by any color officers, disproportionately, we stop black males.
Right.
And there's a number of reasons for that. I'm not going to make excuses for the law enforcement side, but when you have a certain population that feels separated from the rest of society, and then not only because you brought up the Dallas chief, who's African American himself, and the African American population in Dallas, from what I understand, is actually not that large.
Right.
But you have a disproportionate amount of African American people who get stopped.
Right.
And people start to distrust the system,
Right.
and people, just like the black officer that was killed in Baton Rouge, and he's just like, I love the city, but does the city love me?
Yeah, yeah.
It's tough. So
Yeah.
I can only imagine what the Dallas chief was going through. And I think he hit it off correctly when he said, instead of being on this picket line, instead of not really knowing what you're doing, instead of just complaining about the situation, join the Dallas Police Department. And he phrased it in such a way that it wasn't, if you can't beat them, join them. He's
Right.
like, don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution.
Right.
We need you, and we need you now. We are taking applications. I don't know. I thought that was great that he brought that forward.
Yeah, definitely. You know, a lot of times we see this kind of a confrontation narrative, and you know, it seems to breed more confrontation. And we've heard the expression that, you know, especially during this times over the past few weeks, you know, hate breeds hate, violence breeds violence, and a lot of times I heard it in response to the people who were attacking police officers, and it's interesting, but I think it's an important correlation to also apply that to why people feel like they can or they should or attack police officers. It's also part of the hatred breeding hatred and violence breeding violence cycle. You know, it doesn't just start at one end or the other. It's this idea that that this is somehow a logical reaction. You know, there are a lot of people who, you know, and we've actually got a chance to hear from. And one thing that this shooting and this conflict did bring out in very few incidents, you know, very few things that we would want to call a positive outcome to an incident like this. But one of them is that we're now hearing the discussion. Now we're hearing testimonials from newscasters, from politicians, black newscasters, black people in the public eye, who are saying things. I believe it was, I want to say South Carolina's senator, might not have been, but I heard his testimonial on, you know, in Washington, D.C. about how, as a black senator, how many times he's been stopped while he was a senator, how while he was even in the Capitol building, a police officer pointed at him, you know, like, I know that, he says, I know that button, I know that pin, but I don't know you. And the gall and the nerve of somebody to think that they could say that to a senator because their skin color. You know, he did bring out that he was reprimanded. The chief called him. But he also brought out, I've gotten called by several chiefs since I've been here, and they always call to say the same thing. I'm sorry for how my officer treated you. And so this is basically... and I've heard complaints that, social media is the problem. But I think what the problem is that we are seeing undeniably the things that people have been going through. And that's why it's coming to a head, because it's no more denial. Something has to be done. And I think maybe everybody agrees, at least on that point.
I'm not a black male. I'm a
We're
Korean.
We're on live stream right now. That's
Korean,
him. That's Officer Choi.
Korean American, half Native American. Mom's born and raised during the Great Depression in Oklahoma. Full blood Osage. And when she passed last year, she was one of less than 10 full blood Osages that are left. My dad was born and raised in Hawaii, born on the sugarcane plantation. But one of the things that I always try to share, because I also teach at the Merced Police Academy, and that is, guys, you never have a second chance to make a good impression. So this is part of me growing up. I grew up in Fremont, California, middle class, riding my bike around. I must have been 5. And I fell off my bike maybe about 10 or 12 houses away from my home on a busy street. And everybody was driving by, and nobody would stop for me. And I was crying. I was a little kid crying. And I just remember a car stopped, a black man got out. He came over, he grabbed me, he said, "Where do you live?" And it was his girlfriend or wife that was inside the car. And he said, "I know where this birthday party is. I'll meet you there." And he picked up my bike, and he picked me up and carried me all the way home.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's just, when you have that first impression, it goes substantially a long way. Now, fast forward to, oh God, I was 5 then, I'm 45 now. 40 years later, I get a call of an African-American male. It comes in as a black male in a backyard. The homeowner asked this gentleman to leave, and he wouldn't, and she needs us to respond. And I work in Merced County, and for a little city, and Merced County Sheriff's Department is absolutely depleted. They don't have enough patrol deputies to respond. They are miles away, and so our city gets called to handle their calls, and they ask us, and we go out. And as I'm walking up to this place, and I look over, I see a black male, fit the description, blue jeans. He's wearing like a Pendleton type kind of shirt. And he's walking in the area, and I'm just like, "Sir, I got to stop you. Hold on." And he said, "You don't need to stop me." I said, "Listen, this is the call that I'm on." And it only takes me 30 seconds to explain this. I said, "Got a call, black male. Sir, that's what you look like. Blue jeans, you're wearing blue jeans. You have like a Pendleton kind of shirt on. That's what you have on." He said, "But it's not me." I said, "And I understand, and I'm probably making a mistake by stopping you. But I have to leave my fears that you may be the person." My chief, who's African-American, is taking the notes down from the homeowner. He'll be here in a minute. Just stand by for me. I don't pat him down because I don't believe he has a weapon. I don't put my hands on him. I respectfully talk to him in the middle of the street, and he's trying to give me a lesson on law. And he just said, "You can't stop me. I'm in the middle of the road." Well, I have a Juris Doctor. I have a law degree. And I didn't take offense to it. I just said, "I think I can. I'm pretty sure I'm right. But that's it. I'm not going to give him any wiggle room to argue with me." And I just said, but you may be right. But let me just wait for my chief to come here. So my chief comes there, and he's just like, "That's not the guy we're looking for. It's his son." And his son was a couple blocks away. We found him when we talked to him. But my chief said, "Oh, yeah, okay, see you later." And they spoke, and he didn't file a complaint. Everything was nice. But it's amazing if you just take the time, because after the call was over, my chief said, "Usually that guy's a jerk." A jerk to every police officer. And afterwards, I shook his hand. I said, "Hey, thanks for being cool." And he walked away. It
just matter how you treat it.
But it's amazing if you just take the time. There's some situations that you don't have that time or the opportunity. For example, tomorrow we're getting Santa Clara Public Health coming into my department, and they're going to teach us how to de-escalate when we have mentally ill individuals that we're dealing with, because we're doing a horrible job of shooting and killing mentally ill in just individuals.
Nationwide.
Nationwide. It's not just in California, it's everywhere. So we're learning skills and coping mechanisms to bring people off the edge, talk them down, so we can get them help, because that's what we're out there to do. And I forget where I was going with this, but we're learning all of these techniques. I mean, every department's going through this new orientation
Yeah.
to the way that we should be policing, kind of getting back to the roots of how it started, where you knew people,
Yeah.
where you patrolled, so you could say, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
That guy doesn't belong here because
Yeah.
I've been in this neighborhood for 5 years patrolling,
Yeah.
and I know that that person's on vacation because I talked to him or her.
Yeah.
You don't belong here. What are you doing? But
Yeah.
but we need to get back to our roots, and that's not being in the academy. I also teach defensive tactics, impact weapons, and chemical agents. Before, we would have this warrior attitude.
Yeah.
And it's no longer this warrior attitude. It's
Yeah.
not this us versus them. In fact, they tell us in the academy as instructors not to teach that way anymore.
Yeah.
But instead, we are guardians. And because I'm Catholic, I think I'm a guardian angel. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm here to assist you.
Yeah.
Even though you may be a suspect in something, I'm still here to help you.
Yeah.
It may be kind of weird and obtuse for me to think about helping you by taking somebody to jail,
Yeah.
of which we don't do that hardly anymore, guys.
Yeah.
We just don't. There's not enough capacity there.
Right.
We cite everybody out. People get pre-release. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other mechanisms that are going on to assist everybody. But we're changing to this guardian mentality, and that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the old Norman Rockwell cartoon picture where the little boy's running away from home and he's sitting at a diner stool,
Yeah.
and there's an officer there ready to guide him.
Yeah.
Or her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you spoke about the warrior training, the warrior mentality, us versus them, and now, I and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a few decades that kind of training has been implemented.
Yes.
So we have literally several generations of officers who are raised in that mentality, the drug war mentality, the us against them, and now these are people who have been on the front line, protecting and serving, but then, of course, we have all these incidents of use of force. Is there some sort of transitionary period that we have to wait for now, or are the rules different now? I mean, part of the problem, I think, is that here it is 2016, and we're actually, by the numbers, outpacing last year's violence or use of force from police institutions, from the law enforcement agencies. And and a lot of people are looking at these situations, like with the Freddie Gray case, which was highlighted on yesterday's convention in Cleveland, the Republican convention, that the officers are acquitted. When things like this happen, even when you have a situation where a person is taken to jail for literally a non-incident. Something that really should have been maybe a warning and a go, if anything at all. And they die. They die before they get to the police station. No one's held accountable. We see the situation with Tamir Rice, where, if they felt that the perpetrator, or the suspect was dangerous, then why ride right up to him and, within inches and then open fire? So, again, no one charged with any crimes. Isn't that part, if not the whole reason why people are so wholly frustrated and feel like maybe there is no other other action that can cause any sort of meaningful result?
When we think about an institution changing, it's not going to happen overnight. And these are things that are not nationwide standards yet.
Right.
For anybody that's listening, if you like to see the future of where law enforcement is headed, there's a nonprofit agency that is called Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, P-E-R-F. And they've come out with several white papers, several studies where they want to augment, modify, and change the way law enforcement does its business. There's no national standard.
Yeah.
Every state's different.
Yeah.
But I can tell you how it will affect California. In California, San Francisco, L.A., and Oakland, some of the largest police departments out there, are trying to do institutional changes already.
Right.
I had the ability to go to a law enforcement class at Alameda County Sheriff's Department. They have 1,200 deputies.
Yeah.
Roughly right around there. When I got to talk to one of their captains, he said, "Steve, it takes us 2 years if we want to teach something, to get everybody through that training.
Wow.
Because of days off, vacation, some people have to go to court. So if it takes an agency of 1,200 people, imagine LAPD that has 12,000 officers.
Right.
It's going to take a while, but the change is coming.
Yeah.
For example, the Police Executive Research Forum, when they talk about use of force and how we're supposed to respond, the number one mandate that they put out, number one on their list, is every life is important.
Wow.
Every life has value.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So, and I'm not knocking Stockton PD. I don't work for Stockton PD. They have their own issues. But one of the things that the Police Executive Research Forum talks about is like rule number 10. We're not going to shoot into cars that are moving.
Yeah.
And we're not going to shoot from our cars when they're moving.
Right. Right.
So there's these institutional changes that will take place, but it will take time.
Yeah.
So you ask me how long?
Right.
It would be the same question as how long would it take us to end poverty?
Wow.
Yeah, and it may never fully take effect everywhere, but we are starting to make that change. And it begins with hiring as well.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, the economy's better, and not many people want to do this job now, especially when you hear about men and women being killed that are officers, 5 in Dallas, 3 in Baton Rouge. We just lost an officer in Kansas today.
Right.
We lost another 2 before, between the Dallas and the Baton Rouge shooting. 2 from a white male suspect who was escaping the courthouse, was able to either finagle his cuffs, or he was able to get out of his cuffs, but he was handcuffed in the front because he was an inmate going to a court hearing.
Right.
And he took one of the officer's guns away, killed 2 bailiffs, and shot an additional deputy inside there.
Wow.
So there's a lot of people that are thinking, well, I would really like this job. This would be a great calling. But then they hear about all this violence and they're like, oh, this is not for me.
Yeah, it doesn't pay enough for that.
No, and people are leaving in droves. There's a lot of people that are leaving this area, whether it be Modesto or Stockton, and they're going to smaller PDs where they can make more money in the Bay Area, and you don't have this high call volume, and you don't have this constant being threatened or in danger or trying to fight your way out of something.
We're talking with Professor Stephen Choi, Administration of Justice. We're talking about the subject of use of force in light of all the recent happenings that have gone on and the violence coming to a head between police officers and members of the community. And we're talking about actually really about where and how we are to make progress and the things that are really being put into place to remedy the situation. You are listening to Stockton 360 here on KXVS, broadcasting at thevoiceofstockton.org. We're soon to be broadcasting on 92.1 FM. We're going to go to a short break, and we'll come back and continue the discussion with Officer Stephen Choi. This is Governor Don.
Professor Jimenez.
Stick around for more on the discussion. We'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned.
Coming soon.
On your FM dial.
92.1
KXVS.
Hey, I'm Richard Slezak on KXVS here at Stone Soup Studio, and I am the voice of Stockton. You can be the voice of Stockton too. To be part of KXVS, the voice of Stockton, go to our website, thevoiceofstockton.org, to find out more information on how you can be a part of KXVS, the voice of Stockton. Your voice is our voice, the voice of Stockton. Right here on 92.1 FM. Coming soon.
All right, we are back. Stockton 360 on KXVS, the voice of Stockton. Soon to be broadcasting on 92.1 FM in our lovely city of Stockton, California. Broadcasting from Stone Soup Studios right here on the beautiful Miracle Mile. This is Governor Don.
Professor Jimenez.
And we're speaking with Professor Stephen Choi, Administration of Justice at Modesto Junior College.
Yes.
That's what MJC stands for. Thanks, News Director.
Welcome.
It's like, those letters seem familiar.
Where did I hear them before? Where could they be?
Master of Justice Criminal. Now,
Oh, you're so funny.
it's really a heavy discussion. It's a discussion that we're having that people get very passionate about. People who know me, they know I'm passionate about this topic. I personally have experienced. I've seen abuse of authority of law enforcement officers. I've been on the receiving end. I know many people who are listening to this broadcast are also, in that situation. If they haven't felt it, they might have seen it, and especially people in the black community. When we're looking at these polls, and they're asking questions that seem silly to some people in certain communities. Questions about, how many times have you been stopped this year, or how many times have you been stopped without getting a ticket, or how many times you've been stopped for certain types of offenses. And we look at the data, and we're seeing anywhere from 4 to 8 times higher likelihood of being stopped if you're a person of color, especially a male. And then we see these incidences that we're seeing on social media, on YouTube. Most recently publicized, in Baton Rouge, in Minnesota, all over in Missouri. We've seen it over the past year, more and more so. There's compilation videos that literally, if you weren't angry before you saw the video, it's like everyone gets angry watching it, And some of the conversation out there is that, well, that's actually the problem, or part of the problem is that you're getting this snapshot of a situation and you're catching it in its worst moment. But there is a situation there. That did get captured. Something happened. And people, I think, are feeling, they've been marching, they've been protesting, and some people, unfortunately, some people are feeling that they're run out of options, and they're doing things like becoming vigilantes, taking things into their own hands, even so far with premeditation of planning it out and documenting it on Facebook and things like that, and becoming some sort of a martyr or a hero to a cause that that there is no consensus on how to deal with the problem. And so we're in this situation where we have this large group being judged by a minority of offensive people, for the black community or communities of colors. The large community being, feeling like they're being prejudged and discriminated against because of a few bad actors. The law enforcement community now is being criticized heavily now, but because of a few bad actors. And so, feeding into this negative cycle, it doesn't present a solution. It just is that same notion of hate breeding hate and violence breeding violence. But we're seeing changes now in the direction of training of law enforcement. And you were talking about some of those things. I'd love to talk a little bit more about how what are we doing in the law enforcement community, and also, in the community at large, to bridge the gap, to bring these community to reunite our communities. We have to get to the point where we don't think of each other as opposition. You know, like you said, that the change of the training mentality from the warrior mentality to the guardian mentality, which is really, you remember when we were young, when we were little kids, that's what we thought it was. I mean, we thought warrior, yeah, because we watched Rambo and Chuck Norris and all the Delta Force movies. But when it came to law enforcement, you know, wasn't that the good guys versus the bad guys? Good guys being law enforcement.
Yes.
And that's how we thought about it. This new generation, they don't think about it that way.
No.
The typical enemy in many of the forms of entertainment, whether it be film or video games, is law enforcement. How do we? Let's talk about more that is being done to help bring our community back together.
I have I'm going to throw a plug out to him. It's Dan Gatto from Code 3 Cleaners. Great guy, injured in a horrific car accident for Stockton PD, personal friend of mine. And he said, hey, Steve, I'm in there talking to him. He's like, hey, I didn't know this, but Stockton Unified School District has a program where they have an academy within the school itself. And I said, I heard about it.
Yeah.
It's over at Stagg High School. It's like a separate little module.
Yeah.
And what it does is it looks at high school, junior high, and he said, Steve, I had a fourth grader come into Code 3 Cleaners with her dad and other sisters, and she's going to start this administration of justice, this law enforcement academy training at fourth grade.
Yeah.
And he said her dad was completely tatted up, and you could tell that he'd probably been in trouble before. And he looked at me and said, this will be the first one in our family that's going to be an officer.
Wow.
And he was there, and it was expensive. It was like $130 or some. It was a lot for a family to go in and buy the uniforms for the upcoming school year, the boots and the windbreaker and everything else. And this dad was doing it. And that's what we need.
Yeah.
It needs to start early, because we know right now that in high school, it's already too late. In junior high, it's already too late. Fourth grade seems to be where we can do it. And like the Dallas police chief said, he said, listen, society wants too many solutions from law enforcement.
Yeah.
We're not the people that's going to change society. You don't want us to do that, because we're spread too thin already.
Right.
But this partnership of Stockton Unified, California Highway Patrol, Stockton PD, along with the Sheriff's Department, is a great step forward to get that guardian out there, to show students of any color, race, background, socioeconomic status that, hey, listen, there's a different way to think about this. And that's one of the ways to kind of bridge that gap. And it's a small one, and it's only going to affect 40, 80, 120 families, but it's a way to start.
Yeah.
You kind of talked about techniques that we're doing. And I'm going to piggyback off of an NPR podcast that I heard of a now retired Seattle police chief who started, I believe, in San Diego as an officer, and then eventually rose up and went to Seattle. I even forget his name. It was about 2 weeks ago. But his remarks echo what Prof, the Police Executive Research Forum, and a lot of other training that we constantly receive. It pretty much mirrors that. And he said, officers are going to they're going to have to learn how to give up control.
Yeah.
And that's number one from the academy. We tell people, you maintain control. And if you got to grab somebody, you got to grab somebody.
Right.
And he said, we have to learn how to give up control to situations, not deadly situations.
Right.
But when we're talking to people and they want to rant and rave, you let them rant and rave, because it's a way for that person to de-stress, to kind of throw out his or her angst. And once they get that out, then you're able to deal with that person. But if you stop them in midstream, it just bottles up that anger.
Pressure.
And then he said even further, which is what we're trying to get out there as well to these new recruits, and that is a scared officer, an afraid officer, is somebody that's going to hurt somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to instill these basic skills, whether they be fighting skills, ground control skills, handcuffing skills, verbal judo skills, tactical communication skills, and make sure that they know we've given them all the tools to succeed and survive.
Right.
But giving up that control, not being afraid, And then we're doing other stuff, de-escalation techniques. Besides that, we're teaching people don't go hands-on right away. In fact, if you have a mentally ill person and they're schizophrenic, if you even touch them, even slightly graze them, sometimes that aggravates them to the point where they will literally fight you.
Right.
We're also dealing with time and distance. Before, if we would teach in defensive tactics, you want to be 3 to 5 feet from that person. You want to be up close and personal, because if they do something, you want to be able to grab them. Now we're saying, hey, listen, you don't have to be that close. You can be a little bit further. Time and distance is going to be your friend.
Sure.
You can actually use your engine block and be across an engine block away from somebody and talk to them. There's no need to be up there that close. If they run, they've run, and we'll do what we got to do to find them. But there's no need to come up and just automatically start grabbing people.
I think that's a great point. Time and distance being your friend. I think there's too much of a sense of urgency on the side of law enforcement officers, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the fact that they are spread thin, and that they have, even though they're not technically quotas, they have advisements to consider.
Actually, you know what? The whole quota thing, I've never heard that before. Now, it's true if you're a traffic officer and you're riding a motorcycle.
There you go.
Tickets and all.
And you only have 5 tickets and your partners have 35.
Yeah, sure.
They're not pushing that person to write more tickets, but what they're figuring out is, what is this person doing with their time?
Right.
And are they goofing around? Because they could be stopping people and just educating them.
Maybe.
And going, hey, listen, I'm not going to write you a ticket for a busted taillight. It's going to be $25 plus the court fees. It ends up being $75. Please take care of this.
Yeah.
Or are they just sitting underneath a tree just doing nothing?
Yeah, eating a sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
On their Facebook.
Yeah.
But
Dr. Don, I've never heard of a quota before.
Well, and that's quite interesting. The article recently came out. I believe it was in the Post, Washington Post, I should have said, because we have an Oakland Post and a Stockton Post. Washington Post, and it talks about an experience between a transit officer and his superior.
East Coast.
Yes, that's right.
Those guys.
And that was their thing. The whole conversation was like, hey, but you're not stopping these black guys. Why not? He said, I'm stopping everybody. I'm stopping everybody who's violating. He's like, hey, who commits the crimes? Who commits the crimes? And so, it's not a quota. But there are officers, and I've talked to officers who says, yes, there is an understanding that we should be ticketing people. We should be catching people. We should be, and when you have that kind of understanding, then sometimes you got to decide who you're going to mess with, right? You can't stop everyone. Because if you stop everyone, that's what you'll be doing the entire time, stopping people, right? Because if you stop everyone who violates a law, literally, you won't be able to, you won't ever be able to take a break.
You won't ever be able to leave the police parking.
Exactly,
the parking lot.
You'll never leave the parking lot. So what an officer ends up having to do is make a choice. And the choice sometimes is, they don't look so bad. That person, hey, they might be up to no good. But then that's where that personal prejudice and perceptions can alter the result, and then we find situations where African Americans are stopped 4 times as much. Why? Well, there's hardly any African American officers. Maybe that has something to do with it. They're not. They're stopping people. They're letting people go who they might feel are not such a big threat. People who they might feel closer ties to.
Mm-hmm.
So you had talked about how long is it going to take. I think Stockton PD is taking the right step. Eric Jones is a very progressive chief of police. Never met him personally. I just know some people that work for Stockton PD.
Yeah.
Very, very progressive. But the number one thing, and this is nationally for any department, the number one people that have to buy in are the sergeants. Those are the first in line supervisors. If you don't have them buy in to what anybody wants, then no change is ever going to take place. And you need those leaders, those frontline supervisors and managers, to then sit down the ground rule. So the ground rule for me, because it goes my chief, and then it goes me, because there's really nobody in between. We're a small PD.
Right.
I just said, Chief, here's the way that I'm going to do stuff. I'm not going to give any tickets for moving, not for moving, but for mechanical issues. So front light out, I'm not going to stop somebody for that. I may see him in a parking lot and go, hey, your front light's out. But I'm not going to give a ticket for that. I'm probably not even going to stop somebody for that unless they're weaving in the road or they almost hit somebody. And then it becomes a moving violation. But even moving violations, Chief, do you want me to ticket everybody? And he said, Steve, that's up to you. I haven't written a ticket in years. It's embarrassing. Not a year, because I really truly think that in a community like that, you can get across a lot more with just counseling.
Right.
Yeah, and so my chief doesn't sweat me. You haven't written a ticket in years, in a couple years. Nothing like that. And then you have other officers who want to stop everybody, and it's really up to the supervisors, hopefully the chief, but you have to set down some ground rules. So the ground rule for me is, and anybody that comes and rides with me, because I have new officers that come ride, and I'm like, listen, we're not stopping anybody at night unless there's some type of violation.
Right.
You know, if it's curfew, that's a violation.
Right.
Because I don't know if you want to be 16 out at 2 a.m. in the morning.
That don't make sense.
Nothing happens good at 2 a.m., right? The only thing that's really open are emergency rooms. It's not a good
That's
thing to
right.
be out at 2 a.m.
it
if
is.
you're 16.
That's right. It's
But
a great time to be home.
exactly, in bed where you're going to stay safe.
That's right. That's right.
But you have to have these standards. And unfortunately, in our business, everybody has individual standards. But if we could collectively come together and say, listen, across the board, this is our standard, and it's fair, and it's colorblind, then everybody respects that standard.
Yeah.
Even people that you stop, I mean, even people at 2 o'clock in the morning, because I see them, I know they're going from point A to point B. It's the walk of shame home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, guys, what's up? Sometimes I go, I know where you live. It's pretty far away. Do you want to ride? No, that's okay, Joey. And I'm like, okay, cool. I just want to ask. But,
Right.
but when you get this buy-in from now line officers, and you have the standard and the community understands it, then there's not this animus. There's huge animosity, this almost aggression between the people, and I'll call ourselves an occupying army sometimes, between police and everybody else.
Right. You know, I have to say, you know, when you talked about the guardian, the change to the training of the mentality as a guardian, I have to say I felt some sort of a relief. You know, like I said, I've seen it happen before. I've seen a situation where an officer says, "Hey, whose car is this?" And it's a car that's parked. Whose car is this? That's my car, officer. Somebody says, and then he says, "You mind if I search it?" He's like, "Officer, the car is parked." And he says, "Okay, well, you're under arrest. Now I'm gonna search your car." You know, I saw that happen. You know, I saw, and I have to say, you know, when I was younger, you know, depending on the car I was driving, you know, I got stopped a lot, and depending on the neighborhood I was in, you know,
I got stopped a lot.
yeah, you know how it is, and to get stopped time and time again, and to feel like, you know, and I'm gonna have to tell you, you know, people, you know, you see me in the bun here, I'm on the live stream, but I have long hair. And you know that my kids remind me, when my hair's down, that I'll put your hair up, you're going someplace. You know, and the reason why is because of that. You know, I'm afraid of being treated poorly because of what somebody might perceive. And now that's something I could do something about. I can cut off my hair. But, you know, we have this divide, these groups of people who have, for as long as they've lived and their parents have lived, have been having this type of experience of regularly being dehumanized, even if it's not violent, but just in the way that someone's talking to you. Like, you know, no matter what you say, they don't believe you. So why are you asking me any questions? You know, already talking to a person as if they've already done something wrong. You know, things like that. And I think that, you know, as people start to have different experiences with the police, then the change is going to begin. Really, I actually don't feel like it's on the, you know, we're hearing this new kind of, and it's not really new, but it's resurfacing this kind of this suggestion that, well, the communities are responsible for what happens in the community, and you know, if this is going on, then the community needs to fix it. Which is kind of like just saying nobody needs to fix it or something. What is the community, right? But isn't it fair to say that, you know, the law enforcement hold the keys? The ball is always in their court, and it's really up to them to set the tone of how the situation is going to proceed, and therefore how the perception of the relationship is going to develop. But then you talked about this time frame, and you're right. I mean, if this training is being rolled out now, in 5 years, all the officers would have gotten it.
Well, the new officers.
All the new officers.
Yeah.
And then, in the next 30 years, then everyone will get it.
Hopefully. So this is going back into my background, and I was talking to Mr. Houseman from Modesto Junior College about this, and he said, "Steve, what do you think the issue is?" And I said, "Well, we could take every low-income minority kid, because we've done this in our past history, and put them in a school away from their parents where they didn't speak any other mother language. These are Indian boarding schools that my grandmother and my mom went to. We could take them away from their parents, not teach any of their native languages, get them away from their culture, teach them how to be American, and then in 80 years since my mom, almost 90 years, you'll get somebody like me who doesn't live on the reservation, doesn't learn his language, is socialized into American society, who's educated and employed." The issue with that, because it works for like 50% of us, because 50% of us live off the reservation from my tribe. The other 50% have huge issues on the reservation, so even that's not a total fix. Highest substandard housing, which means no water, electricity, highest unemployment rate, highest incarceration rate, highest sexual assault victim rate on the reservation than any other place in the United States or for any other ethnic group. Highest not graduating college, highest not graduating high school. The list goes on. We're the highest in every single thing. So I said, even then it's not going to work. So it goes back to the Asian side of me now. And a village will have to raise a child.
Right.
It's going to come not only to law enforcement, it's going to be on all of us to literally make sure that this child, the next generation, is raised properly. It's not just going to be law enforcement. It's going to be families, parents. And kudos to this dad that I never even met who took his daughter in as a fourth grader. Those are the small steps that are going to have to take place if we want change. Because the absolute horrible thing that's going to happen, if we can't control this, I know people don't like to hear this, it'll be a civil war. That's what we're headed to. And if we don't get this under control now, we are doomed as a nation.
Right. And and it seems like you're right. The first solution that you posited is still a non-solution. It produced actually some good and then worse than
horrible
before.
Evil.
Worse than before. And we really do have to move to a realization that diversity is our strength. Diversity is what makes us increases our value to each other and to the whole of the earth. And those are things that have societies that embrace diversity, even ancient societies, have always been stronger, have had higher standards of living, have a higher education. And also without demonizing the culture of people. Because that is kind of what happened, in your first scenario. Part of the reason why there is such, it's not because of the Native American culture was going to produce this negative situation. It's because of the lack of support, I guess, if we could call it that. I think it's a very, very nice way to put it. The opposite of support for the community. And so in this move towards this solution, let's, in fact, you know what? Why don't we go to a break? And when we come back, let's discuss that aspect of it, about moving ahead. And what you said, we got to raise our young people up, as a village, and this community approach. Let's talk about that when we get back. You're listening to Stockton 360 on KXVS. We're talking with Professor Stephen Choi, Administration of Justice at Modesto Junior College. And this is Governor Don.
Professor Jimenez.
And, I guess we'll just be back after a brief break. Listening to Stockton 360, KXVS.
I had a question for you guys.
KXVS, the voice of Stockton, here at Stone Soup Studio at the Peace and Justice Network.
Coming soon.
On your FM dial.
92.1.
KXVS.
Hi, I'm Marielle, the news director of KXVS on Stockton 360 here at Stone Soup Studios. Featured people, top news, places, and issues of Stockton, California. So if you want the top news, the top places to go, and information that keeps you listening closely about your town, check out Stockton 360 News Magazine. Join us on KXVS, the voice of Stockton. KXVS LP Stockton on 92.1, coming soon. Monday through Friday from 5 to 7.
We are back. Stockton 360 on KXVS, the voice of Stockton, broadcasting on the voiceofstockton.org and soon to be on 92.1 FM. That's right, with the help of our community and all these wonderful supporters. We'll be back on the FM dial, which will be totally exciting and awesome. If you're listening to us or watching us on the live stream, you see our new shirts. Hey, that's right. Want to thank Leaders Urban Wear for that. And we are here. This is Governor Don.
Professor Jimenez.
We're talking with Professor Stephen Choi, Administration of Justice at Modesto Junior College and also an active law enforcement officer, about the use of force, and but more specifically about how we move past, or not move past, excuse me, how do we make better our situation and move toward resolution and improvement in the relationship between our law enforcement and our community, or we should say our law enforcement and the rest of our community, including the law enforcement, of course, in the community. When this stuff happens and when we see violence, it's funny. I'm used to Cleveland as an example. Now, it could be just coincidence, but Ohio is an open carry state, and the GOP convention was going to be there. Everyone knows. We've known about it for over a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were going to be some open carry groups that were going to be out there, representing. But once a black open carry group announced that they were going to be there as well, then we heard calls from law enforcement to the governor's office that they should ban the Second Amendment temporarily in Cleveland for the duration of the convention. When we see situations like Philando Castile, where people were calling for where is the NRA on this? Philando had the right to bear and carry a firearm, as was allowed in the state. Was his rights violated? And actually, the NRA did finally make a statement on that, saying that they expect that to be an investigation, and if he had the right to carry, it should have been respected. But we hear this in times like with San Bernardino, with the terrorist incident, again in Orlando. The topic of gun control always comes into play. And even with now what happened in Dallas, are there too many guns in Texas, or too many people have access to guns and things like that? What about that? I mean, isn't it true, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that places that have the highest level of gun control are the places in general that have the highest crime? And we're talking about L.A., Chicago, New York City, zero gun permits, so just about, right? No handguns allowed, and yet the highest incidence of handgun deaths.
I think we talked about this last time I was on.
Yeah.
And one of the things we always like to point out is Switzerland has compulsory military service. So when you discharge from the military, I hope that's not me.
Yeah. Okay. Reminder.
That's all right.
But
You are correct. Switzerland does?
Yeah. They
Does,
have
huh?
compulsory military service when you
rifle
discharge
in
from the
every house,
military.
right?
Rifle in every, and it's an assault rifle.
Yeah.
Something is wrong in America. It's something about our culture.
Right.
Canada also has, per ratio,
Yeah.
has a high number of guns,
Yeah.
but not nearly as many deaths. I truly believe that when we have these mass attacks, which every single attack, whether it's on law enforcement or terrorism related, in San Bernardino, these are all legally bought guns.
Right.
Yeah. But the guns that I'm worried about, even though I'm a law enforcement officer and the little town I work only has one officer at a time,
Right.
it's just me,
Yeah.
and 20 minutes away is the CHP or the sheriff's department or
Right.
somebody else that can ostensibly roll towards my way if I'm screaming for help.
Right.
But I'm not afraid of the guns that are legally bought. I'm afraid of the guns that are legally bought, stored in a home, the house is burglarized, and then that handgun, shotgun, or rifle then falls in the hands of a criminal.
Right. Black
'Cause-
market
yeah.
weapons.
Yeah. So there's two things. I listen to Freakonomics a lot.
Yeah.
Stephen Lettner or Levitt, and I forget the other Stephen. But they talk about it's ludicrous to try to regulate a legally thriving industry when you have a black market that is equally thriving.
Right.
There's no way that you can do it. I'm all for gun legislation that makes sense.
Right.
I don't think the bullet button or the lower capacity mags make any sense to me as a
No.
law enforcement officer, because if you train enough, you can literally have a bunch of 10-round magazines
Oh, yeah.
and fire off just as many rounds as if you had a high-capacity magazine.
Sure.
What would make sense to me is if Governor Brown said, which he's not going to call me, but if he did, he said, "Hey, Steve, what's going on?" I'd be like, "Jerry, this is what I'm thinking about."
Okay, what are you thinking about?
Because England does it. And that is, if you own a gun, you have to buy a safe for that gun. And that safe is mounted into the wall. Yes, it would prohibit some people from buying it, but I'm sure the state can have some money for lower income people that can put a safe to legally store guns, because I mean, guns are stolen even when you have friends over. So if you have teenage kids, sometimes those other teenage kids steal your guns, and it gets passed around.
Or at least they tell people they're there, and then some unknown comes and
and takes it. Or you're on vacation and you don't take your guns with you because you're flying, and somebody comes in and steals your guns.
Right.
But man, if we had sensible gun legislation and we just said, hey, all your firearms need to be in a gun safe that's mounted to a wall or cemented into your floor,
Yeah.
we would cut down the flow of firearms used in killings. It would take a while for those other firearms to break down, but there wouldn't be a new, fresh flow
Right.
of these firearms.
cheaper and more readily available.
Yeah.
But doesn't that preclude the renter from having firearm? You know, you got to build something into the house.
Well,
yeah.
you could. I'm thinking about this. They have those big standing safes that are
Sure.
fairly inexpensive at Costco.
Yeah, too heavy to carry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And they run fairly cheap.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's reasonable. Of course, the highest incidence of death of firearms in the United States of America is suicide.
Yeah.
Right. Some 2/3 of the people killed with firearms to kill themselves.
Yeah.
And it's higher and lower depending, I guess, on the mood and the economy and things like that. It was terrible in 2008, 2009. But you know, that is definitely a possible solution. I know one thing that also happens in England is by and large the officers are not armed.
That's slowly changing now,
Yeah.
and they have armed response unit. I have a buddy that's a retired Modesto officer, and he was an officer in England before. And he said, "Yeah, Steve, when you're over there, you learn how to fight."
Yeah.
Because I was not one of those armed officers, but now they have more and more armed units.
Yeah.
Just on a branching off tangent question, where we're getting a lot of our de-escalation policy from is from Scotland. Scotland has a majority of their police are not armed.
Right.
And so what we're doing in San Francisco is taking it over. And being the forerunner for it within California is if you're walking down an alley and somebody's not charging you with the baseball bat or they have a chain or a crowbar, you literally raise up your hands to act as non-threatening, and you back out of the alleyway and you call for help,
Yes.
even though you're a police officer.
Yes.
There's no need to go draw your gun out and then start hunting people down.
Right.
You literally de-escalate it because we're shooting too many people, and they're they're looking at past studies, how far somebody can cover
Right.
the distance-wise from when they have a knife to when they can attack an officer.
Right.
So they're looking at all these old urban myths that we've been taught, that we were learned in the academy.
And broken windows.
Yeah. And so we're trying to look at everything with a new light and come up with new strategies. And that's one of them. And that's from Scotland. And we're saying, hey, listen, let's de-escalate, back out. In some situations that can happen. There was an Oakland PD female officer, and they just went through this de-escalation training over at Oakland PD because they're also on the forefront. And this crazy guy came out with a chain and started whacking her in the head. She had no time to de-escalate.
Right.
She was almost killed. And I believe she had to use her service weapon to shoot at him so he would stop. But
Okay,
in those
God.
situations, it doesn't work. But but we do have these new things that are coming down the pipeline.
But it's the rare incident, that it doesn't work in, or it might be the special case of someone who is mentally ill. But that is not the majority of situations, and de-escalation would work fine in a great majority of situations. But you're right, it does come to those times. And that's what the service weapon is for. That's what the training is for. That's why officer, is it 6 months? Every 6 months they have to be recertified on the firearm?
Every 3 months.
Every 3 months. Oh, yeah. See, so, this is something that, every 4 times a year is a check whether the officer is competent in taking that firearm out and placing a well-placed round, into a target. And that's something that's automatic, and also the de-escalation training, though, has to be that way too, right? It has to be automatic as well.
But listen to this, and this is crazy because we do this backwards. We're I think you're going to have to correct me on this term, litigious?
Oh, litigious, yes.
Yeah, litigious.
We are a litigious society. So,
we are.
So think about this. I've been doing this job, 1994 is when I went to the academy, 22 years.
Yeah.
I've never fired my firearm. But if you just do the math, every 3 months I retrain on my handgun. Plus, I do it every Friday for Modesto Junior College. So I'm constantly shooting. I'm actually a decent shot.
Yeah.
Not great, but I'm a decent shot. I'm very proficient, especially on the move. All that training, and I've never fired my gun once. But think about this, Governor Don. How much tactical communication training have I had? Because I use that every single day.
Right.
When do I get trained to notice not only the symptoms of somebody's under the influence, but when somebody's having a mental crisis?
Right.
Those are the big questions, because that's when we really hurt people. I
Right.
mean, those are the people that need to be protected that are coming to us, but maybe outwardly are showing all these symptoms. But when do I get trained to diagnose that? And people are going to say, hey, you're a police officer. You're a law enforcement. You're not there to save everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, quite contrary. I am the guardian.
Right.
Right.
I'm supposed to be there.
Yeah,
but
you are there to save everyone.
But we're living at this civil law society where people can sue for everything, and we constantly train on these high risk liability things like firearms and driving and defensive tactics, and we rarely get retrained or trained at all about these other things,
which actually happen more often.
Yeah, that happens every single day.
Right.
Yeah, crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy, and a lot of that I think has to do with how our economy works and how we allocate budgets, and certain things, a lot of people feel that medicine should be socialized, as well as law enforcement that should be something that doesn't, nobody, the budget. Who cares about the budget? These things are all write-offs. This is all a write-off, right? Look, we got to write this stuff off, right? We can't. We measure like how many taxes to collect based on law enforcement budget and things like that, and yet we're spending 50 cents out of every dollar in our municipalities on law enforcement, and don't cover the training that the officer is most likely to need. But those things are changing, yes?
Yes. To kind of go back even a little bit further, I have a lot of friends that are probation officers, and they were inside the San Joaquin County Jail talking to correctional officers. And one of the things that they tried to change is just the vocabulary. So it's all about the stigma, the words that are associated with it. So instead of using the word inmate, they tried to get them to use the word patient.
Whoa.
Yeah. Totally different viewpoint, right?
Wow.
Because now you can bring in the medical model of treatment and treat crime as an illness.
A mental illness.
And if it's an illness, whether it be mental or physical, drug addiction,
Right, sure.
you can treat it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an entirely different way. And there was a lot of pushback.
Right.
A lot of pushback.
Sure.
They're not patients, they're not clients. And I think the term was,
I'm not a
was
doctor.
client. Yeah, was client. These correctional officers were like, these guys are inmates. They broke
The
the
guys
law.
who own the prison, that's the client.
Yeah, exactly. But it's this huge reversal that we're seeing. So one of the things that we talk about, and these are things that are sweeping across the United States, there's something called the Pretrial Justice Institute. And what we're trying to get away from just within the criminal justice system is pretrial incarceration.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I always talk about is the Eighth Amendment, and it talks about reasonable bail.
Yeah.
And when you talk about bail, you talk about 15% you have to put up in order to get bailed out.
Right.
Now, a lot of people get booked, but they get automatically released.
Yeah.
Specifically for
OR.
misdemeanors. Yeah.
Or
Owned. Yeah. Released on your own
Own
recognizance.
recognizance, right.
So what ends up happening is, let's say for Stanislaus County, because I know there because I teach there, $50,000 for domestic violence. So if you got booked for domestic violence, you would need how much?
15%. So 15% of 50
$7,500 in cash.
in cash.
To give to a bail bonds company to go ahead and get pretrial release. If you don't,
Too bad.
Yeah.
you're stuck inside there until you
Housing.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
housed there.
Till you get your...
So who's able to bail out?
Yeah. Nobody.
People with money,
or if
right?
you have a house.
or you have a house
Put
that
a
you can
collateral.
put it. Yeah,
Again, people with money.
people with money. So what it does is it really hampers people that are in a socio lower economic class.
Right.
And you're
So they
talking
lose their job,
their
everything.
children, maybe
Yeah.
they lose their apartment,
Right.
they lose their car because they can't make payments. They
lose everything.
Yeah. So check this out, and maybe not a lot of people know this. 90% of cases are adjudicated or adjudicated through plea bargains.
Yep.
So if I'm in jail for 3 months, I'm trying to get out, and now I'm going to lose my kids in my house, I'm going to take a plea bargain that is disadvantageous to me.
Right. Right.
So now I'm going to get these terms of probation that I possibly can't,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't comply.
And you might also be admitting to guilt of something that you didn't
Exactly.
Exactly.
Just because I want to get out.
Exactly.
So the Pretrial Justice Institute is talking about right now that only the worst of the worst should be housed for pretrial detention. We're talking murderers, rapists, child molesters.
Violent criminals.
But everybody else should be released early, and what their supervisory release should be is minimal.
Right.
And the only facets that should carry over for pretrial release, any type of limitations, are ones that involve public safety. Maybe you have a domestic violence person and they're a truck mechanic and they got to get released to go back out to work, but you're going to say, listen, you're going to stay at your mom's house. And from 7 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, you're under house arrest until
Right.
yeah.
Until
And we're going to call you. We're going to FaceTime you.
Yeah.
And it better be your face on that FaceTime.
Oh, I love that.
And
We're going to FaceTime
and we're going
you.
to GPS it. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
And it better ring up to right there.
Yeah.
To your mom's house. If you're any place else.
got to be there or
That's
be
it.
a genius.
Violation of
Exactly.
probation.
So there's these things that are coming down the pipeline, and if people are patient, we're training people.
Yeah.
We're trying to hire better candidates.
That's great.
But it's gonna take a while.
yeah.
Well, when you brought up the Eighth Amendment, okay, isn't reasonable bond, reasonable bail, isn't it already unreasonable if you need a bond?
Yes and no.
This is the hardest part. Okay, so I haven't always worked for a small farming community. I worked in another community that had a large Asian population. And if you're trying to tell a Cambodian, Lao, Hmong person, Vietnamese, you're like, hey, your son's going to go to jail for, beating up on you for, elder abuse, but he's going to be able to bail. And they're like, what's bail? And you're like, you give the government money and they get released. Well, to them, that sounds like
Bribery.
a bribe. Yeah. So they're coming
yeah.
from these communist countries, Cambodians coming from the Khmer Rouge, and they're like, what is any different about this?
Yeah.
So it really,
But it is because of the bond. Look, and let me tell you why it's different. So if you give the government $7,500 to get out on a $100,000 bond, $100,000 bail, then you don't get that money back. So
Yes.
it is bribery.
yes.
But if you if your bail was instead set at $7,500 and you could pay that, then you get it all back when you go to court. So then it's
Yeah.
not a bribery. But because of the bond and the unreasonableness of the bail, I mean, I know it's a side subject, but I think that bonds in general prove violation of the Bill of Rights.
The reason why there's a bond also is because it's to ensure that you come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it only
You know?
caters to
Where
one
you-
special group.
Yes, one special group,
Exactly.
definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you got enough money, you actually have enough money to flee.
And that's why you have defense attorneys or public defenders that go up in court and say, wait, Your Honor, the bail is too high. He's not a risk, flight risk.
Some
first
public
first offense, yada, yada, yada. Lower it down to this.
Yeah.
And it does get lowered sometimes, but in the
Sometimes.
meantime, that person is still stuck inside there,
Oh, I
waiting
agree.
for the yeah.
I agree.
And it is a tremendous waste of resources, especially now if a person I guess it depends on what they're facing as far as punishment, and that leads to the seriousness of the crime. But if the reason why, I mean, they need to get out because they need to stay in the society, they need to stay integrated, they need to keep their job, they need to pay their rent. That negates or at least decreases the flight risk just because they're showing up to work and they're
this is
taking their
even-
kids to school.
And Dr. Don, this is even crazier. So you have a guy, domestic violence. He's arrested. I book him. He's inside jail. He's got to post 15% of his bail. Obviously not going to happen.
Right.
So now the wife, who has kids at home, who relies on this guy's income, now it's a double effect, and it's a crippling effect on society.
And it also contributes to why people don't make the call on a domestic violence situation, and they end up staying with the abuser because they can't afford
To lose.
to do
Yeah.
better. They
Exactly.
can't afford the process.
Yes.
Wow, interesting. This is this discussion.
Dynamic.
We could have this show 3 hours a day, every single day of the year, and we would never run out of things to talk
Once a
about.
week.
Opposite shore. And we definitely would love for you to come by weekly if you could, because it isn't always use of force, but there's always something to discuss when it comes to jurisprudence and law and law enforcement.
And criminal justice.
Of course.
Yeah.
So now, here we are. Now we're not past trauma. We are in the thick of the trauma. If you heard the sheriff, I can't remember his name, but he was speaking at the GOP convention.
I know who you're talking about.
And and he was far from unifying. I would say quite inflammatory as far as the way he's talking about some things, even though I can understand the perspective. He is obviously a product of the warrior mentality, us versus them. His brothers, as he feels, have been murdered by monsters. This is but that feeling that you saw in him, that rage, that outrage that you saw in him, we need to look at that on the national stage and say, these people who are losing their family members, their actual blood relatives, this is the same rage that they feel, the same anger they feel, and yet it's pointed in the opposite direction. Where is the solution in that? There's no solution in that. There's only more hostility, and people feel like they're in a war of attrition. Can you last long enough to survive? Both sides. Law enforcement is under a lot of stress right now. And the communities of colors have been under these stressors for, I would have to say, longer, because the tables have always been turned the other direction up until recently. Now the tables are starting to turn, and people are starting to see both sides of the discussion. And somebody might say, "Oh, well, we should have always known that, because could we possibly believe that all these people in communities of colors have just been lying to us for decades and decades about their mistreatment? People who are not criminals, who have no criminal history, but still undergo this kind of treatment." And we're actually seeing, I think, an interesting backlash of people who are literally saying that there isn't a problem, and that they're using creative numbering, creative statistics to say, oh, actually, it's tougher for white people. I've even seen that report come out today that white people are more likely to be abused by the police, using creative accounting. Denying the problem is just as harmful as exacerbating the problem. That's really what got us here, isn't it? Denying the issue, denying that there's a problem. So for us as a community, besides events where we come together and say, "Yay," what do we need to do on a daily basis, on an ongoing basis, to bridge this divide, to bring our community together, understanding that we depend on each other and mutual respect is the way to go. We don't actually have to have an enemy, bad guy. I mean, what do you call it? An opposition in the society specifically. It doesn't have to be us versus them. It's it's us. How do we get there? What can we do besides the things that we mentioned?
Well, I'm going to say this before I answer it, and that is I've been teaching at the Merced Academy for almost 8 years, and in the past 3 years, we've had 0 African American cadets out there. 0. And that's disturbing because that means that there's a segment in our society that has given up, that has truly just walked away, that is so disenfranchised that even though there's jobs out there and it pays well and it's got a good retirement, that they're willing to forego everything. I had this talk with a lieutenant from a neighboring police department here, and he said, "Steve, what do you want us to do? We can't force people to become police officers." I think Stockton's taking the right thing. Their cadet program is awesome. They're doing that great thing over at Stagg High School. You got to get them young. You got to get them motivated. You got to keep them on track. So this is how I'm going to answer the question that you just posed. My 3-year-old grandson said, "Papa, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Papa's going to go work police today." And he said, "Papa, I want to go work police." He has no idea what I do. No idea. He's never seen me in uniform or on FaceTime. I'm going into work. He's never seen the patrol car, never seen any like any of the cool stuff. But it's that kind of nurturing, that kind of thing. So I'm kind of in this quandary where I can leave police work now. Like right now, I can give my 2 weeks notice and be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Or I can be the exact opposite, which I'm going to take. And that is the last 5 years, because I'm almost 45, I'll retire at 50. And I may go longer because I love the job.
Yeah.
But I can retire at 50.
Yeah.
And I got 5 years to make this the best damn world for my grandson and 2 granddaughters. And that's the hope that we have to have.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have hope, you don't have belief that this thing can change for the better, then you've already given up.
Yeah.
And that's a cancerous disease.
That's right.
So within everybody, you have to have hope.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna echo what the chief of police from Dallas said. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. You can do so many things.
Yeah.
The reason why I got into teaching, the reason why I got into law enforcement, because I'm thinking, man, I could really help people.
Yeah.
And not only can I really help people, I can help multiple families.
Right.
And then I figured when I started teaching, holy smokes, I can help not only one family, I can teach somebody to be a teacher.
Right.
And now they're helping up. And so it magnifies.
Yeah.
But if you have that hope, you have that glimmer, you have that spirit, then that's what you need to keep fostering in your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your kids that live around you, all these different things. There's so many things that are negative. There's just not enough positive.
Right.
Be that positive force.
Yeah. Wow.
So it goes back to the village raised as a child.
Well, it sounds like, Professor Choi, sounds like you're saying calling all superheroes.
We need everybody.
We need you.
I just talked to a Cambodian kid today, or it was yesterday, and I'm like, he's a Delta College student. His name's Dane. And I'm like, he's like, "Mr. Choi, I'm thinking about becoming a police officer." I'm like, yes, that's right.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm like, my God, we need people.
Yeah.
We need you.
That's
Over
right.
there, the sound engineer.
Uh-huh.
We need you. We need good people out
Officer
there, and
Henry.
we need them now more than anything.
Well, and that's something that I definitely would echo. The need is great. Of course, the workers are few, but this is a position where the hero that you believed in when you were a youngster, the hero that was emulated by people who you knew when you were young, those heroes are needed. We need people who don't. We don't need people who want to be a cop so they catch people. We don't need people who want to be a cop so they can bust people or hurt people or do things like that. We need people who want to be a police officer because they care. And this, heroic level of care is what the job calls for, and you have a calling, and there are a lot of people out there who have that feeling inside, and they maybe didn't know that police officer was the option, because I think that warrior mentality has been quite poisonous for the blue line, and but the guardian mentality, to me, is so attractive. It's so attractive, and I know there's other people out there who are thinking, you know what, I am a guardian. And they could find a place that maybe they didn't know. They could find a place in law enforcement. And until we have people of that mentality to, replace the older mentality, we, of course, we do appreciate the service of the officers who've dedicated their lives. And it's okay that we're learning a new way to do stuff. That's called progress. And we don't have to feel slighted or bad that we're part of the old knowledge. I mean, what's this thing they're doing in school with what's that kind of math that they're doing?
Common Core.
Yeah. See, that's supposed to be good, but us old guard, we're thinking, hey man, when I was in school, we just learned math.
I had to learn that.
He had to relearn.
Oh God.
So we're in a transitionary period, and calling all heroes. It's your turn.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful.
We need you.
Well, thank you, Professor Stephen Choi, at Administrative of Justice at MJC, Modesto Junior College, regular contributor to Stockton 360. We really enjoyed this conversation and recognize the importance of it, and really thank you for your participation and more importantly for your level-headedness, your care in the conversation, because it is so important, and you are an authority. And we need to be able to trust our authorities. So I want to thank you for being an authority we can trust, and a great voice for our community.
Thank you, my brother.
No, you're quite welcome.
Thank you, my sister.
Yes,
thank
indeed,
you too.
indeed, and thank you for your service, and please continue. I'm excited that you're going to be on board for at least another 5 years. We need you desperately, and all these people out there saying, hey, where are the good cops? Well, here's one right here, and they are out there, and if you didn't know, they outnumber the others.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And thank God for that, because those of you who have had a tough experience with a law enforcement officer, your life might very well have been saved because of the good cop that showed up to the scene. So even those who have suffered the hardship, recognize that we don't want to be judged by the worst on our team.
Okay.
All right. Well, again, thank you. We're going to go to another break. I think we have an interview that we're going to be playing in a few minutes. Stay tuned for more Stockton 360 right here on KXVS, the voice of Stockton, broadcasting on thevoiceofstockton.org. Soon to be on 92.1 FM right here in lovely Stockton, California. This is Governor Don.
Professor Jimenez.
And I want to thank our special guest, Officer Professor Stephen Choi, Administration of Justice at Modesto Junior College, making the world a better place, one hero at a time.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back with more Stockton 360.
Coming soon.
On your FM dial.
92.1.
KXVS.
DJ Nikki D.
London Mark.
Al X.
And you can catch us on the Rise and Shine 209 show.